She's only a nurse, the surgeon muttered, tightening a blood-soaked bandage with one hand while motioning for more gauze with the other. Let's not pretend she can do more than patch and pray. Emma Hayes didn't even glance in his direction. She'd heard worse. Outside, the thunder of helicopter blades beat down over the base. Dust spiraled through the air. Somewhere past the wire, gunfire cracked like popcorn. Inside the triage tent, it was chaos. 2 Marines on stretchers, one moaning, one unconscious. A radio squawked with overlapping voices. The medic staff was overwhelmed, and the surgeon, experienced but arrogant, was losing his grip on the room. Then came the sound of boots. Heavy, urgent. 2 Navy corpsmen rushed through the flaps. Carrying a seal, blood streamed down the man's side. Shrapnel glittered in his abdomen. His left leg was nearly gone below the knee. Emma's eyes locked on his face. Jack Reynolds. She knew him, or more accurately, he knew her. They laid him on the table. The surgeon leaned over, GSW to the lower abdomen. Partial femoral bleed. He's not going to make it without a vascular. Jack's hand shot up and clutched the surgeon's collar. His voice was barely audible. No, not you. Her. The surgeon hesitated. What? Jack turned his head with effort. His eyes landed on Emma. You have no idea who she is, he whispered. Then his head dropped back. The monitor beeped erratically. The surgeon looked from Jack to Emma. You know him? I do, she said, already moving. Back away. I need suction, clamps, adrenaline, and a clean tray. Now, he blinked. Lieutenant, you're not cleared for... I said now. Something in her voice cut through the tension like a razor. The surgeon stepped aside. Emma threw on a new pair of gloves. Her eyes scanned Jack's wounds in seconds. She located the bleed, positioned the clamp, applied pressure, and injected the adrenaline. The corpsman moved without hesitation. Everyone else watched. One of them whispered, "Who is she?" The monitor steadied. Emma leaned closer, whispering into Jack's ear. Why are you here? This wasn't your mission, he mumbled back, lips barely moving. Compromised. They knew we were coming. Someone inside. Emma's jaw clenched. Someone inside. Again. Not here. Not now. Jack's body jerked. His eyes rolled. She worked faster, sealing the wound temporarily and prepping him for a vac. A chopper was already inbound. We've got him stable, she said. Move him to evac zone B. As they wheeled him out, the surgeon walked up beside her. You going to explain this? No. Who the hell are you really? Emma peeled off her gloves. Like you said, just a nurse. He didn't believe her, not anymore. She stepped outside the tent and squinted into the fading afternoon light. The sun hung low over the mountains. Her hands shook, just slightly, not from fear, from memory, because Jack's words had unlocked something she'd buried deep. 5 years ago, she'd left that world, left the call signs, the missions, the silent flights into countries that didn't exist on maps. She became Emma Hayes, combat nurse. Not Agent Hayes, not Ghost Echo, not the name whispered through briefings. She thought that chapter was closed, until now. Her fingers reached into her chest pocket. They found the old coin, the one she swore she'd never carry again, smooth, cold, brass, etched with a single phrase, Semper Occultus. Always hidden. She stared at the horizon. Somewhere out there, the people who set this ambush were already moving, and if Jack was right, someone inside the base had helped them. That meant they were watching, listening, waiting. Emma knew what she had to do, not as a nurse, as something much more dangerous. She turned on her heel and walked. Toward the intelligence tent, no one stopped. Her, no one dared. Inside, she sat at a terminal, typed a password she hadn't used in years, and sent a single line of encrypted text. Echo 3 awake. Asset compromised. Prepare Phase 2. Seconds later, a green light blinked on screen. Confirmed. Behind her, a shadow appeared at the tent's entrance. You're not supposed to be here, a voice said. Emma didn't look back. Neither are you. The silence that followed was enough. She stood, turned and walked past him, shoulders straight, eyes forward. The past had come back, And this time, she wasn't running from it. She was walking straight into it. A long time ago, in a house lined with medals and silence, a little girl watched her father salute a coffin draped in a flag. The woman inside had worn a uniform, carried wounded men on her back, and died in a place no one would ever visit. That woman was Emma Hayes' mother. She was never a headline, never on TV, just a medic who ran into fire and didn't come back. That's where Emma's story began. She wasn't raised on lullabies. She was raised on radio static, deployment orders, and the smell of boot polish. Her father, General Thomas Hayes, wasn't the comforting type. He trained soldiers. He didn't know what to do with a grieving daughter. So Emma trained herself. By age 12, she could disassemble a service pistol blindfolded. At 16, she hacked into her father's classified mission logs just to prove she could. And at 18, she enlisted, not under her father's name, but her mother's maiden name. Hayes wasn't listed on her forms. She didn't want doors opened for her. She wanted to break through them on her own. Basic training didn't humble her. It hardened her. While others struggled, Emma excelled in field medicine, survival, and tactical evasion. She volunteered for Arctic deployment, jungle recon, and trauma units no one else would touch. She was the quiet one, the one who listened, the one who saw everything and said nothing. That's why they noticed her. The agency, no uniforms, no medals, just black files and whispered meetings. They recruited her not because she was fast or strong, but because she was invisible when she needed to be. Efficient, focused, dangerous. Her first mission was in the Balkans, tracking arms smugglers who used hospitals as cover. She slipped in as a Red Cross volunteer. 3 weeks later, the smuggling route collapsed. No one ever connected the dots. After that, they gave her a code name, Echo 3. She worked in silence, in the shadows, until the day she didn't want to anymore. That day was in Syria. A civilian convoy was hit. Children, women. No mission had warned them. No intelligence had flagged it. Emma held a dying child in her arms and realized something. No one ever saved the people who didn't matter on paper. So she walked away, turned in her badge, disappeared, chose a life where she could save instead of destroy a combat nurse. That's who she became, or tried to, until Jack Reynolds showed up, until those 5 words dragged the past out of her. Like a knife to the ribs. You have no idea who she is. He wasn't just talking to the surgeon, he was warning someone. Emma knew that Jack had never broken protocol. He didn't talk unless it mattered. If he whispered those words in that tent, it meant only one thing. There were ears nearby that shouldn't have heard them. There was a leak, and he was warning her before he bled out. Back at the base, under the cover of night, Emma returned to her quarters. She moved with care, not paranoia, precision. Her room was a plain concrete box with a cot, a footlocker, and a single lamp. Underneath the cot, taped to the frame, was a sealed pouch. She hadn't touched it in years. She peeled it off, opened it, and stared at the contents. 1 flash drive, 1 encrypted comms key, 1 silver ring, her mother's, and a folded slip of paper with a name written in red. Inc. Willis. Captain Adrian Willis. She. Hadn't thought about him in a long time. A logistics officer. Too clean. Too perfect. Always around when things went wrong. Always with an alibi. Back then, she suspected him of selling info, but she never proved it. And when she left the program, she buried that file with everything else. But now he was stationed at the same base. Too close to be coincidence. Emma slipped the ring onto her finger. She didn't feel emotional. She felt clear, like a blade freshly sharpened. She opened her locker and pulled out a folded uniform. Not her medical scrubs. Not her nurse's patch, the old one. Black, unmarked. No insignia. She laid it on the bed and stared at it for a long moment, then folded it again and put it away. She wasn't ready. Not yet. But soon. Outside, the wind howled across the sand. The base generators hummed. A single helicopter passed overhead, its lights blinking in the dark like a warning. Inside, Emma sat at her desk and opened the flash drive. Old files. Redacted reports. surveillance clips, but one folder blinked with a recent date. Someone had updated it. Recently, she opened it, her screen filled with satellite images, intercepted messages, and a mission log from Jack's last operation. And there it was, confirmation. The route his team took was leaked. The insurgents were waiting for them before. They even crossed the first checkpoint. Only one person had access to that exact route timing. Captain Willis. Emma leaned back in her chair. So it was him, still playing both sides, still protected, still hiding behind a clean record and a fake smile. But not for long. She reached for the comms key, plugged it in, and started typing Echo 3. Shadow confirmed. Hostile internal. Directive. Observe, confirm, neutralize. Then she deleted the message from the logs, closed the laptop, and looked at her reflection in the dusty mirror. Not a nurse, not anymore. The sun rose over the desert like it always did, quiet, slow, merciless. The air was still, but something had shifted inside the forward base. Unspoken tension hung like smoke. People moved quickly, avoided eye contact, whispered when they thought no one was. Listening, because Jack Reynolds was still. Alive. Barely. And whatever he'd said in that triage tent had started a ripple none of them could see. Emma moved through the base like a shadow, clipboard in hand, stethoscope around her neck, the perfect image of a combat nurse doing rounds. But every room she entered, every corridor she walked, she was scanning, watching, listening. She already knew who she was hunting. Captain Adrian Willis. He was a logistics officer. Smart, smooth. The kind of man who always shook your hand a little too long and smiled just a second too late. He wasn't a fighter. He was a mover. Of information, of assets, of power. And he had access to every convoy, every patrol route, every encrypted dispatch in and out of the base. No one questioned him, but Emma had. Years ago. Now she was ready to finish what she started. She stopped by the medical ward first. Jack lay in a darkened room, machines humming quietly. He was sedated, barely conscious, but alive. She looked at him for a moment, remembering the mission they'd crossed paths on in Yemen. Jack had saved her life once, dragged her out after a roadside bomb took out half their team. They never spoke about it afterward. Now it was her turn. She leaned in close, her voice low. You were right. It's him. I'm going to take care of it. His eyes fluttered open for a second. No words. Just a flicker of relief. Emma left the room and headed straight to the comms center. On paper, she was just updating patient logs. But her credentials, still partially active under an old clearance, got her in. She sat down at a terminal and typed quickly. The system opened. She pulled up Willis's message traffic from the last 72 hours. There. It was an unscheduled transmission. Buried under supply manifests. Masked with outdated codes. Encrypted, yes. But the metadata gave it away. Coordinates, timestamps, and a signature she hadn't seen since the Balkans. The ghost key. Only one network used that signature, black market arms dealers tied to 3 ambushes in the last 6 months. The same network that had butchered Jack's team. Emma printed a copy and slid it into her pocket. She didn't need permission. She needed proof. Outside the tent, she spotted Willis near the fuel depot, laughing with a group of junior officers, too relaxed, too confident. She walked up, calm and collected. Captain Willis, she said. Need a word. Medical file issue. He glanced at her, nodded with that too smooth smile. Of course, Lieutenant. Lead the way. She took him to the storage bunker behind the clinic. It was soundproof, quiet, private. Inside, she turned, locked the door, and faced him. His smile faltered. This about Jack? He asked, playing dumb. No, she said. It's about the 8 men who died because you sold their route. He blinked. Then gave her a slow, cold grin. You don't have proof. She pulled the printout from her pocket and held it up. I have enough. He stepped closer, voice dropping. You're not in that world anymore. Hayes. You walk out of here and drop this. I promise you'll regret it. You think anyone cares what a nurse has to say? She didn't flinch. You're right. No one listens to a nurse. Then she pulled out her old ID. The one with no name. Just the letters, E3, Echo Unit. His face went pale. She stepped forward, voice calm. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk into the CO's office, hand over your clearance, and request a transfer for family emergency. Then you're going to disappear. If you don't... She let the sentence hang. Willis looked at her, rage building behind his eyes. You don't have the authority to do this. Emma leaned in. You sold coordinates that killed American soldiers. I don't need authority. I need 5 minutes with the right satellite uplink, and your name disappears from every database you've ever touched. You'll be lucky if mercenaries don't find you before we do. Silence. Then he nodded. Slow and bitter, fine. He left without another word. Emma stood in the empty bunker. The walls closing in. This wasn't over, but it was enough. For now. She stepped outside into the blinding light. People moved around her, pilots heading to briefing, medics on stretchers, supply trucks unloading crates. To them, she was still just the nurse. But somewhere in a quiet room, Jack Reynolds was still breathing, and somewhere in a sealed intel file, a single report had just been updated. Echo 3 reactivated. Internal breach neutralized. Field readiness. Confirmed. Emma walked away without looking back. Because when ghosts come out of hiding, they don't leave footprints, they leave warnings. The convoy moved out before dawn, 10 vehicles deep carrying supplies, fuel, and just enough firepower to make it look official. But tucked between 2 cargo trucks was a single black case marked Medical Refrigeration Unit, the same case that now held Emma's gear. She wasn't listed on the manifest. Her name didn't appear on any records for this operation. As far as command knew, she was still in the medical ward, treating minor injuries and keeping her head down. But Emma Hayes had never been good at hiding when it mattered. This wasn't a mission, at least not to anyone else. It was supposed to be a routine resupply to a forward position near the red line, the unofficial boundary between safe and very much not. But she knew better. The intel she pulled from Willis's encrypted file wasn't just proof of betrayal. It contained coordinates, not from last week. From tomorrow, another ambush was coming. Another American patrol was going to walk into a kill zone, unless she stopped it. And if that meant becoming Echo 3 again, so be it. As the convoy rolled into open desert, Emma rode in silence, seated between 2 young Marines who thought she was just there to check on vaccine transport. She kept her head down, hands loose, eyes always scanning. The landscape stretched endlessly. Rocky ridges to the east, a dry riverbed to the west. Classic terrain for a hit and run. Perfect for snipers. She leaned toward the driver. When's the last time you saw drone coverage for this route? The Marine shrugged. 2 days ago. All clear? Emma's jaw tightened. Too long. He looked at her sideways. Something I should know? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her vest and pulled out a folded image. Satellite capture. Fresh. Stamped with red code from the GhostNet channel. The same ridgeline up ahead, but with fresh tire marks. Heat signatures. Temporary cover. The beginnings of an ambush position. She spoke low. Fast. Tell the lead truck to slow down. Spread the formation. Weapons up. He stared at her. On whose orders? Mine, she said. Now. He hesitated only a second, then relayed the command over comms. The convoy shifted. Drivers adjusted, gunners lifted their barrels, eyes narrowed. 30 seconds later, the first shot rang out. A sniper round. Center mass. It hit the front axle of the lead truck, blowing the tire, flipping it sideways. Sand and metal exploded into the air. Then came the rockets. 3 RPGs arced in from the ridgeline, striking the 3rd and 5th vehicles. Fireballs erupted. Shouts. Screams. Dust swallowed the road. Emma was already moving. She rolled from the back of the supply truck, drew her sidearm and bolted for cover behind an overturned crate. The Marines around her were dazed but reacting fast. Return fire lit up the air, but they couldn't see the shooters. Emma did. She pulled a scope from her bag, dropped to her stomach, and scanned the rocks. 3 shooters, 2 spotters, moving in pairs, trained, not insurgents. Mercenaries, same type as the group she encountered in northern Syria. Same tactical pattern. Quick, smart, ruthless. She spoke into her earpiece. Shooter 2, left flank 10 meters above the boulder. Switched to suppressive. Someone answered. Young, shaky. Who the hell are you? She replied without hesitation. Echo 3. Do it now, the gunner obeyed. Fire pinned down the shooter. Emma moved like she'd never left the field. Low, fast, calculated. She reached the wounded Marine from the flipped truck. Young, pale, bleeding badly. Femoral nick, she said, tearing open her kit. You're not dying today. He looked up at her, dazed. You're the nurse, right? She smiled faintly. That's what they tell me. Then she packed the wound, tied the tourniquet, and got him dragged to cover. The firefight raged on. Dust clouded everything. Emma climbed onto a supply container, aimed, and took her shot. One of the mercenaries dropped, then a second. She moved again, never staying in one place, calling out positions, guiding fire like a ghost in the storm. By the time the backup gunship arrived, the ambush was broken. 3 enemy bodies. 2 escaped. 1 wounded and captured. Emma stood over him as the Marines cuffed his hands. Blood stained the sand under him. She crouched beside him. Who sent you? He smiled through broken teeth. You already know. Her voice was calm. I want to hear you say it. His eyes met hers. Willis. Of course. The transfer had been a cover. He hadn't run. He'd planned this before she even confronted him. Emma stood, turned, walked away. The Marines stared at her like she wasn't real. She didn't explain. She didn't have to. Back at base, she would file no report. Her name wouldn't appear on the mission logs. The official story would read, Convoy survived enemy ambush due to rapid Marine A response. But those who were there knew the truth. A nurse had saved them, not with bandages, but with experience, with instinct, with the kind of skill no training manual ever teaches. That night, under a sky full of static stars, Emma sat alone beside a radio. She turned the dial to the GhostNet frequency and transmitted 6 words. Target active. Next phase begins. Standing by. Then she leaned back, closed her eyes, and waited, because this wasn't over, and she wasn't done. The convoy moved out before dawn. 10 vehicles deep, carrying supplies, fuel, and just enough firepower to make it look official. But tucked between 2 cargo trucks was a single black case marked Medical Refrigeration Unit, the same case that now held Emma's gear. She wasn't listed on the manifest. Her name didn't appear on any records for this operation. As far as command knew, she was still in the medical ward, treating minor injuries and keeping her head down. But Emma Hayes had never been good at hiding when it mattered. This wasn't a mission, at least not to anyone else. It was supposed to be a routine resupply to a forward position near the red line, the unofficial boundary between safe and very much not. But she knew better. The intel she pulled from Willis's encrypted file wasn't just proof of betrayal. It contained coordinates, not from last week. From tomorrow, another ambush was coming. Another American patrol was going to walk into a kill zone unless she stopped it, and if that meant becoming Echo 3 again, so be it. As the convoy rolled into open desert, Emma rode in silence, seated between 2 young Marines who thought she was just there to check on vaccine transport. She kept her head down, hands loose, eyes always scanning. The landscape stretched endlessly. Rocky ridges to the east, a dry riverbed to the west. Classic terrain for a hit and run. Perfect for snipers. She leaned toward the driver. When's the last time you saw drone coverage for this route? The Marine shrugged. 2 days ago. All clear. Emma's jaw tightened. Too long. He looked at her sideways. Something I should know? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her vest and pulled out a folded image. Satellite capture. Fresh. Stamped with red code from the GhostNet channel, the same ridgeline up ahead. But with fresh tire marks. Heat signatures. Temporary cover. The beginnings of an ambush position. She spoke low. Fast. Tell the lead truck to slow down. Spread the formation. Weapons up. He stared at her. On whose orders? Mine, she said. Now. He hesitated only a second, then relayed the command over comms. The convoy shifted. Drivers adjusted, gunners lifted their barrels, eyes narrowed. 30 seconds later, the first shot rang out. A sniper round. Center mass. It hit the front axle of the lead truck, blowing the tire, flipping it sideways. Sand and metal exploded into the air. Then came the rockets. 3 RPGs arced in from the ridgeline, striking the third and fifth vehicles. Fireballs erupted. Shouts, screams. Dust swallowed the road. Emma was already moving. She rolled from the back of the supply truck, drew her sidearm, and bolted for cover behind an overturned crate. The Marines around her were dazed, but reacting fast. Return fire lit up the air, but they couldn't see the shooters. Emma did. She pulled a scope from her bag, dropped to her stomach, and scanned the rocks. 3 shooters, 2 spotters, moving in pairs. Trained, not insurgents, mercenaries. Same type as the group she encountered in northern Syria. Same tactical pattern. Quick, smart, ruthless. She spoke into her earpiece. Shooter 2, left flank 10 meters above the boulder. Switch to suppressive. Someone answered, young, shaky. Who the hell are you? She replied without hesitation. Echo 3. Do it now, the gunner obeyed. Fire pinned down the shooter. Emma moved like she'd never left the field. Low, fast, calculated. She reached the wounded Marine from the flipped truck. Young. Pale, bleeding badly. Femoral nick, she said, tearing open her kit. You're not dying today. He looked up at her, dazed. You're the nurse, right? She smiled faintly. That's what they tell me. Then she packed the wound, tied the tourniquet, and got him dragged to cover. The firefight raged on. Dust clouded everything. Emma climbed onto a supply container, aimed, and took her shot. One of the mercenaries dropped, then a second. She moved again. Never staying in one place, calling out positions, guiding fire like a ghost in the storm. By the time the backup gunship arrived, the ambush was broken. 3 enemy bodies. 2 escaped. 1 wounded and captured. Emma stood over him as the Marines cuffed his hands. Blood stained the sand under him. She crouched beside him. Who sent you? He smiled through broken teeth. You already know. Her voice was calm. I want to hear you say it. His eyes met hers. Willis, of course. The transfer had been a cover. He hadn't run. He'd planned this before she even confronted him. Emma stood, turned, walked away. The Marines stared at her like she wasn't real. She didn't explain. She didn't have to. Back at base, she would file no report. Her name wouldn't appear on the mission logs. The official story would read, Convoy survived enemy ambush due to rapid Marine response. But those who were there knew the truth. Nurse had saved them, not with bandages, but with experience, with instinct, with the kind of skill no training manual ever teaches. That night, under a sky full of static stars, Emma sat alone beside a radio. She turned the dial to the GhostNet frequency and transmitted 6 words. Target active. Next phase begins. Standing by. Then she leaned back, closed her eyes, and waited. Because this wasn't over, and she wasn't done. The morning sun was a harsh white over the base, burning through haze and suspicion. Emma moved silently through the corridors, her footsteps echoing like a warning. Everyone seemed tense now, whispers in the mess hall, eyes following her back when she turned. She was no longer invisible. She went straight to the intelligence hub, where the terminal screens glowed with maps, intercepted chatter, UAV footage. She had permission, or at least the old clearance she hadn't formally surrendered. She logged in under Echo 3. The system flinched, then let her through. Emma pulled up the files from the ambush. Satellite imagery, mercenary positions, field reports. She overlaid all known intel and marked gaps, places where no one had eyes, places where reinforcements could slip through. She cross-referenced with Willis's supply logs. Every time a convoy passed through those blind zones, it matched an attack within 24 hours. A pattern, she printed it all. Then she found another file, one she hadn't expected. A personnel roster with names darkened, access codes, base sectors. One name stood out, Lieutenant Mara Collins, Medical Logistics. Her name was linked to advanced supply manifests. No red flags in HR, no disciplinary record. Clean on paper. But her access privileges overlapped with Willis's roots. Emma's lips tightened. 2 traitors? Possibly a network. She copied the dossier to a hidden drive and slipped it into her jacket pocket. Then she walked out. The base was crowded. Soldiers training, trucks rolling, faces her own but distant. She walked straight to Mara's office. She knocked once quietly. The door opened. Mara's eyes widened. "Hayes?" she said. Emma nodded. "We need to talk." Inside, Mara watched Emma with something like fear or guilt. She stood by her desk, arms tight around herself. "Why did you send me the supply maps knowing they could be intercepted?" Emma's voice was low. Mara's knees shook. I thought it was internal review. I had no idea. Willis, she swallowed. He threatened to make my family disappear if I refused. Emma's heart hammered. How long? He approached me 3 months ago in Kabul, said he'd been tapped into a black market network. He gave me an ultimatum, cooperate or vanish. He began feeding me logistics codes. I never saw the contracts. I never saw proof. He kept me small. I was just the link. Emma nodded. You'll help me undo it. Mara closed her eyes. What do you want me to do? Emma laid out the printed convoy maps, the ambush data. She pointed zones without surveillance. Install counter-monitoring here. Reroute supply chains. Feed false manifests to throw them off. We cut Willis out of his supply network. We isolate him. Mara swallowed. I'll do it. But if he finds out... Emma's face softened. I'll protect you. Mara nodded, relief flooding. They worked. Mara at her console, Emma coordinating with field ops. Within hours, new supply routes were drawn. Decoy convoys scheduled. Surveillance drones reallocated. Every transfer point got redundant comms. Emma re-entered data under aliases so that any audit would point away from her. By midday, confusion was already hitting the enemy. A convoy rerouted through valleys they hadn't expected. UAVs feeding fake telemetry. Supply clouds masked. Logistics diversions. The trap was closing. Emma walked out into the dry heat. She paused at the barrier, shielded her eyes, stared at the horizon. She thought of her mother's last words. You'll know what you're made of when there's nothing left to lose. She steeled herself. A voice popped up behind her. Lieutenant Hayes. She turned. It was the surgeon from before. He looked grim. Command wants to see you. Now, Emma nodded. She followed him into the command center. The base CO and his aide waited. The CO's face was serious. Hayes, he said, we've had multiple reports of supply mismatches, route changes, security breaches. We need to know your involvement. Emma held her breath. Sir, I only executed medical orders. The CO's gaze sharpened. The logs point to someone with your clearance. Someone who's been manipulating supply chains. That puts lives at risk. Emma's mind raced. She had to control this. She nodded humbly. If you want, I'll walk you through it. He nodded. He gestured to a terminal. Let's see it. She walked over and logged in with the alias she'd planted earlier. The screen opened on false manifests, decoys, reroutes. She glided through the data as though she'd created it. When Command's eyes flicked to real maps of ambush sites and route anomalies tied to Willis, Emma kept her face calm. Sir, I flagged anomalies after reviewing the ambush intel. I initiated alternate logistics as precaution. Then I discovered deeper network leaks. I've done what I could to protect convoys. To minimize risk, the CO studied her. His eyes narrowed. Then he said, This contradicts what we know of you. Sir, Emma said, voice firm. If someone's undermining mission integrity inside this base, that weighs more than any procedural infraction. I'd rather break protocol than lose men. The CO leaned back. His aide murmured in his ear. At last he nodded. Very well. But from here on, I want oversight. You cooperate fully. Also, a joint internal audit is being assembled. I need transparency. Emma bowed slightly. Yes, sir. The CO dismissed her. The surgeon gave her a quick nod of respect. Outside, she walked toward the medical ward. Her heart pounded. She had forced Command to accept her actions without exposing her true role. But this was dangerous. When she entered Jack's room, she sat beside him. He stirred, eyes fluttered. She held his hand. Gave them the data. she whispered. Jack's eyes opened. He tried to speak, then shook his head. She squeezed his hand. "We're moving." She left and found Mara in the comms room. Mara was pale. "They accepted it," Emma said softly. Mara exhaled. "Now we just wait." Emma walked back to the entrance. The base was alive with energy. Soldiers moving fast. Trucks rerouting. Alerts in comms. Deep down, Emma knew the real fight was still ahead. Willis had been exposed, his logistics severed. But would he retaliate? Would there be another ambush? She looked at the desert beyond the wire. She resolved she would meet it, and when she did, she would not hide. She would fight. The desert went silent before it broke. It always did. A stillness that felt unnatural, too perfect, too clean. Birds stopped flying. The wind shifted. Somewhere in Emma's gut, she knew it was about to happen. She stood just outside the forward command post, staring at a convoy she'd helped reroute 3 days earlier. It was supposed to be safe. The route was clean, reinforced, and shielded by satellite sweep every hour. But it didn't feel right. Mara Collins stood beside her, holding a tablet, scanning the live GPS feeds of all 5 transport trucks. "They're 20 minutes out from Checkpoint Echo," Mara said, her voice tight. "No delays, no chatter." "Too quiet," Emma murmured. Mara looked at her. "You think Willis still has access?" Emma didn't answer. She just turned and walked toward the satellite uplink terminal. Inside the small metal structure, the heat was stifling. Emma powered on the encrypted GhostNet node, entered a backdoor code only 3 agents were ever given. One of them was buried in Bosnia. Another vanished near Mosul. That left her. The screen blinked once, then filled with surveillance overlays, real-time feeds, heat signatures, and there, just to the west of the convoy's path, clustered shapes. Too small for vehicles, too organized to be random. She zoomed in. 10 men, crouched low. Shoulder-fired launchers, ambush formation. This wasn't coincidence. This was retaliation. Willis had lost control of the base, but not of the mercenaries he hired. He was sending a message. Emma ran. She burst into the radio tent. "Redirect the Echo convoy now. Push them north. Use the riverbed trail," the operator blinked. "Ma'am, that area's not cleared." Emma grabbed the mic herself, keyed into the convoy's lead vehicle. "This is Echo 3. Immediate turn bearing 075. Abandon manned road. Proceed to fallback route Delta." There was a long pause on the line. Then a voice answered. "Roger that. Turning." She exhaled. Then the explosions started, not from the convoy's path, but from behind. She ran outside. Smoke rose from the base's southern fence. The motor pool was on fire. Fuel trucks ignited. A second blast tore through the communications array. Diversion. Willis had staged a local attack to distract them from the real target. Emma turned to Mara. "Get to Jack. Lock down the med ward." "No one gets near him." Mara didn't ask why. She just nodded and ran. Emma grabbed her gear. Black fatigues. Suppressed sidearm. Tactical headset. GhostNet relay. She moved like muscle memory. Quick, silent, trained. Not the nurse. Not even Echo 3. Something colder. She crossed the burning yard, ducked under collapsed antenna wire, and entered the armory. 2 guards were down. Not dead, sedated. Inside, only one man stood, Captain Adrian Willis. He wore standard-issue desert camo. Nothing tactical, nothing armored, but he had a briefcase in hand. She raised her weapon. "Don't," he turned slowly, smiling. "Emma, I figured you'd show up." She kept the gun leveled. "I gave you a chance. You took the other road." "I had no choice," he said calmly. "These people are superiors. They don't care about us. They trade lives like currency. I just learned how to profit from it. By selling patrol routes, killing your own." Willis shrugged. "They were numbers, coordinates. You know how this game works." "You knew it before you walked away." Emma stepped closer. "That's the difference between us." "I walked away. You sold your soul and stayed." He sighed, glanced at the fire through the window. "This place is finished. The moment they trace the ambush, my contacts will vanish. So will I. Not today." He looked back at her. "You gonna shoot me?" "If I have to." For a second, they just stared. Then he moved, quick, toward the radio unit behind him. She shot, one round. Center mass. Willis staggered, dropped the case, hit the floor. She stepped over and kicked the briefcase aside. It was unlocked. Inside, cash, foreign IDs, and a hard drive. She picked it up. The drive was tagged with symbols she hadn't seen in years. A vault of transactions. Proof of everything. Every route he sold. Every dollar he took. Every soldier who died for it. She secured the case and turned to leave. Willis coughed once. Blood bubbled on his lips. "Tell me something," he rasped. Emma paused. "Was it worth it?" he asked. "Coming back?" She looked down at him. "Ask the men who lived." She walked out without looking back. The fires were mostly out. The convoy had arrived safely. The base was on alert but stabilizing. In the medical tent, Jack was awake. Barely. Emma sat beside him, set the briefcase down. "It's over," she said. He smiled weakly. "You?" she nodded. "Willis is done. But this," she tapped the case, "goes higher." "He wasn't working alone." Jack's eyes sharpened. "You're going after them." Emma looked at him. "I have to." He reached for her hand. "Be careful." "I always am." But they both knew that wasn't true. She walked outside, looked at the horizon again. This time, there were no enemies waiting, just unfinished business. Emma Hayes was back, and the world was about to remember who she really was. Washington, D.C. was colder than she remembered. Not the weather, though fall hung sharp in the air, but the people, the silence in the halls, the glass smiles and iron eyes. It had been 10 years since Emma Hayes last walked into the Pentagon, and now the badge at her chest didn't say nurse. It didn't say anything at all. She passed security without question. They knew she was coming. The briefcase she carried, the same one she took from Willis, had opened doors few people ever dared knock on. Inside it was a rot of deals, dead soldiers, and the signatures of men twice decorated and 3 times corrupted. They didn't fear Emma Hayes. They feared the truth she carried. She entered the sub-level conference room at 0800 sharp. 4 men in suits, 1 woman in uniform, Admiral Raines, all high command. None of them smiled. Raines spoke first. "You've been busy." Emma set the briefcase on the table, opened it slowly, and pushed the drive toward the center. "Everything's there. The payments, the routes, the orders." Willis wasn't the architect. He was just the errand boy. One of the suits leaned forward. "We've reviewed the contents. And we're disturbed." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Disturbed enough to act?" Silence. Raines folded her hands. "This program, Echo, was buried for a reason. You understand that?" "It was buried so people like Willis could operate without consequence," Emma said. "But I didn't come here to revive Echo. I came to finish what it started." Another man spoke. "We're prepared to handle internal discipline, quietly, no headlines. No inquiries." Emma leaned forward. "No, you're going to do better. You're going to purge every name on that drive, every field office, every compromised network. You're going to clean house, publicly." The room tensed. "You think you can dictate terms?" one of them asked. Emma's voice dropped. "No. But the moment I walk out, this drive has 5 scheduled uploads to 6 foreign intelligence agencies. If I disappear, the story doesn't." Raines met her gaze. "And what do you want, Hayes?" She looked around the room. "Not revenge. Not medals. Just justice. For Jack. For the convoys. For the families who never got answers. You can either fix it from the inside, or I burn it from the outside." Raines nodded once. Understood. When Emma walked out of that room, the wind had shifted. Something had cracked behind the walls of power. And somewhere, men who thought themselves untouchable were suddenly watching their backs. But Emma wasn't done. A week later, she was in Texas. Small town, quiet cemetery. She stood beside a new headstone. Jack Reynolds, the SEAL who whispered the words that reignited her purpose. The folded flag rested in her hands. She didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the tears had already been spent. Behind her, Mara Collins approached slowly. "It's done," she said. Command scrubbed the whole chain. 10 resignations. 3 arrests. More coming. Emma nodded. And the survivors? Reassigned, protected, some are testifying. Quietly. But it's a start. Emma placed the flag at the base of the headstone. He deserved better. Mara hesitated. What about you? Emma stood. I've still got a list. Mara smiled faintly. Of enemies? Emma shook her head. Of promises. She turned to leave. And together they walked down the narrow gravel path. 2 weeks later, in a hangar outside Ramstein Air Base, Germany, Emma boarded a plane. She wasn't wearing a uniform, no medals, just a ring around her neck, her mother's, and a satchel with documents no one else had ever seen. Not all traitors worked in shadow. Some stood on podiums. And if her next target required her to cross borders, break laws, and burn what little remained of her own past, so be it. She sat down in the cabin, opened her encrypted tablet, and stared at the name at the top of the new file. Colonel Victor. Laskov retired, the honored dirty, the man who once commanded her mother's final mission. The one who left her behind, her fingers hovered over the keys. This wasn't vengeance, it was a reckoning, and it wasn't just hers anymore, because the world had spent too long ignoring. The women who saved lives without asking for credit, who fought wars without ever making the news, who disappeared into shadows when the job was done. Emma Hayes would not disappear. Not again. As the engines roared and the plane lifted into the clouds, she closed her eyes. Not a nurse, not a soldier, something else, something the system had made, and now something it couldn't stop.